waking up in a bath of ice. I'm a victim of an organ heist. You know it is true, you know this time you're never gonna get it. But you already stole my heart. Yeah, you ripped it and tore it apart. You know it is true, you know this.
Welcome to Cutthroat Queens Podcast, where all the cow shit is stored after the mushrooms are screbbed from it. We're here to take an open and honest look at all things indie horror. My name is Brett Mitchell-Kent, and I'm joined by this moldy sandwich I found under my porch, Elton Skelter, and the ghost that haunts Danny DeVito's shoe closet, Chelsea Pumpkins.
These are just getting nicer every month, aren't they?
Hello.
I hope you have
Hi.
some nice shoes.
So where we at? What we've been doing? It's March. The year is flying by, and the releases, they keep on coming. So we've been doing some reading. Brett, what have you been reading this month?
Oh, quite a bit. We've been doubling up on my book club, so we've been reading 2 books at a time, which is just fantastic for all of my spare time that I have. But the one that I read that is not a book club book was actually an advanced reader copy of something fantastic. It's called...
Oh, good luck with
I'm not gonna
that.
be able to say this. So it's called Stradivarius.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm
God.
guessing that sounds right.
Stradivarius,
I think it phonetically it looks like it says Stradivarius. So
I was
we're
going
gonna
to go
with
with
that.
Stradivarius.
Stradivarius. Ray.
I don't
Sorry.
know. Elton, you would know.
It's Stradivarius.
Yeah, you're the fancy Brit. So it's by Ray Knowles, and it's releasing by Brigid's Gate Press on May 3rd. So May 3rd of this year, which is just a little over a month away. It's called Stradivarius, and it is fantastic. It is this creeping horror about a young woman who inherits the house from her, deceased father, who was an amazing musician, played violin, and as she's going through the remodeling process, whatever, she is consistently hearing the playing of her father on this super rare Stradivarius violin that he was actually murdered over. No spoilers, because that's like the first thing that happens, but it is an absolute ride. I can't say anything without giving it away, but what I will say is the characterization in this novel is impeccable. Haunting is, I guess, the best word that I can describe it. This is a haunting novel, and every single person needs to go and get it. I can't recommend it enough at this point.
So like tonally, what kind of subgenre is it? Is it kind of like a gothic? Is it a bit romantic? Is it a bit like erotica? Like what kind of stuff you working with?
Yeah, definitely not. Well, it's not erotica, but it's definitely gothic. I think that Ray, from everything that I've read of hers, that's kind of a strength where she leans. So it definitely has a gothic vibe. It's modern, but it's like a modern gothic. And then it's got this, paranormal / potentially psychological bend to it. It's really great. So definitely May 3rd.
We love a pre-order.
Oh, definitely do it. I can't wait to add this one to my shelf. So sorry, that was one. I don't want to ramble too much about that. It's the most recent completion that I have, so I'm super pumped up about it still. I get this way at the Indie Great Books, but I also read another. This was for our book club book, and I wanted to ask you all a question regarding it. It was called The Measure by Nikki Erlich.
Is it by Nicki Minaj?
By Nikki Erlich. And this one, I'm sorry, it's not an indie book, but there was a piece of it that's just so neat that I wanted to discuss it. So this book is about every single person on the planet over the age of 22 is delivered a box with a string inside it. And that string tells the total length of your life. So if you have a short string and you're pretty young, it tells you that you're going to be dying soon. Long string means you're going to live for a lot longer. I want to know, would you open your boxes?
I would have more questions. Like, is there a measuring stick? Do you know if a string is 5 inches long, do you know how many years that is?
Yes. I mean, in the book, it pretty quickly shows that like the researchers were able to determine down to a pretty good margin when you'll die.
Do you know where you're at when you open it? Does the string start at 22 or does it start?
So it actually, initially it starts whenever you are, because there's just one day where everybody gets it.
Oh,
so people in their 80s, obviously they know that they would have a long string and they open it and they have a long string, and then on everybody's 22nd birthday, the box shows up. So
I think I was less jaded at 22, so I would probably think twice about it then. If I got it now, I would definitely open it, because Jesus Christ, this is hard. So I would be like, give me the short string, baby. And I hope this ends pretty quick.
Nope.
Yeah, no, I don't know. I think back then I would, if it arrived on my 22nd birthday, I probably would think twice about it. I don't know.
I think I would open it. I don't know. There's pros and cons, right? So
she'd open it, but then she'd bitch about it for years afterwards. Oh, my string's not as long as
if I had years
left.
I mean, show me your string. I'll show you mine.
What if you opened it though, and then Baldwin's was like half the length of it? You'd be really gutted.
That's a thing. Yeah, like that's one of the things that they explore in the book is couples.
Yeah,
where one has a very short string, one has a very long string.
But I think it would be nice to help you. We waste so much time doing things we don't want to do, right? And I think it would be nice.
Yeah, I had to give up working.
Yeah. Sorry, guys. I quit. I'm dying in like 3 years. So what's the point?
I don't know. Personally, I feel like my ADHD would make it so I'm still wasting most of my time.
I think the issue would be when I got close to the end, I'd probably get really anxious. And I don't know that I would want to live with that anxiety. But I think the rest of the time.
Does it like acknowledge the fact that, like, say somebody opens their box and realizes that they've not got the longest life in the world, would the string shorten if they decided at that point in their life to kill themselves? Or
it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
It does address that, but yeah, the string is the length that you will be living,
regardless of how you die.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I mean, I would assume that if you decided, trigger warning. Sorry, we're talking about ending lives, but if you decided to go that way, you would probably
show
fail
up on your string
and
already.
end up a vegetable.
Oh
yeah, no, yeah, I wouldn't be able to not. To be fair, I'm just I'm a glutton for punishment. I would open the box and be like, oh
yeah. I think having the box and just knowing it's in there, I'm like, well, just show it to me then.
Yeah.
How about you, Brett?
No. Mm-mm.
You're not going to
Absolutely
look at
not.
it. Okay.
Nah.
What if me and Elton open
a
it
lot of
and we
insight.
show you ours? You wouldn't get FOMO?
Oh, I mean, I would probably get FOMO, but I think that I am, what's the word that I'm looking for, where you just do things on a whim?
Impulsive?
Impulsive, that's the one.
Spontaneous?
Yeah, I'm impulsive, spontaneous enough to just toss the box. So it wouldn't matter. It'd be gone.
Yeah,
I'll
that doesn't
donate it
surprise
to
me.
Goodwill.
You've thrown out things that you've needed multiple times since we've started this podcast.
So, yeah. I just get it, throw it away. Meh.
And what about everyone else? Everyone listening, what would you do as well? We'll tweet about this, and then you can send a
Tweet
little
us.
reply
Ooh, yeah.
underneath and let us know what you think. What would you do if you received a box on your 22nd birthday with a piece of string in it that told you how long you would live for? Would you open it?
Would you open it? Oh, and we have an Instagram now, so you should follow us. I think, hang on, I'll look up what it's called. But I can make a poll. How
Oh my
cool is
God, yeah,
that?
do a poll.
What?
Do
I
a
know.
poll, Charles.
We're very fancy. Look at
We're
us.
Cutthroat Queens Pod. All one word, no underscore on Instagram. You can see some behind the scenes photos. You can always find our episode links. You can see our pretty faces. Yeah, it's good stuff. Are you done with that? With your exercise, Brett?
Yeah, sorry. I just
You just zoned out.
He's
So
like, yeah,
anyway,
I'm done. Bye.
Elton, what did you read?
I was very unprepared this month. I had a lot of stuff going on writing wise and life wise, but I did manage to pound through a book in one day. And it is a pre-release from Leith Press, and it is called The Helios Syndrome, by an author called Vivian Shaw. She is very cool. It's got horror elements to it, but it's also got like fantasy elements. So it's about this necromancer who works for the government in trying to figure out what happens when planes crash. It's really, really interesting. They can take a piece of the train wreckage and a crystal ball and essentially find out what the problem was when the plane went down, why it happened, and it helps with, changing the pattern of aerospace engineering in the future. So if there's a problem with a part or whatever, they can use it to figure that out and pull that part from stuff. It's really, really cool. So basically, this necromancer works for this government, and then they have this mysterious issue with a plane in the sky that should have run out of gas, but keeps disappearing completely off radars and then coming back again on the same trajectory around the sky. And it's really, really interesting. And it's written in this kind of cool, comedic, sort of tongue-in-cheek kind of tone. It kind of gave me Dresden Files vibes. And it's from Leith Press, so it does feature a essentially queer central character. I think possibly bisexual. It doesn't really go into a lot about the character's personal life, but there's a bit of a enemies to lovers romance with the big boss at work, and it's just perfect. It is really, really good, and it's not a long read. I think it's about 142 pages, and I managed to get through it in about 3 hours, and I couldn't get enough of it. It was wonderful. Vivian Shaw. I don't know.
That sounds like a really cool combination of like modern technology and horror devices.
Yeah.
But like the language used in it, this author had obviously either knew a lot about already aerospace engineering or like, piloting, or had done a buttload of research about it. And it was just really, really good and really interesting. And yeah, just absolutely fantastic book. I think it's available. It comes out on the...
I have it if you want.
Yeah.
It comes out. Oh, I don't know when it comes. Oh, April 15th.
April 15th.
But it's on sale now.
It's on sale as a pre-order, the paperback, for $11 from the Leith Press website. We will link that in the notes. But yeah, I was really impressed with this. I read a lot of stuff from Leith Press anyway. I love them. They're one of the oldest indie queer specializing presses out there, particularly that deals with like horror and spec fic. And I just love everything that they turn out. But this was really, really good. I was not expecting to get so wrapped up in it. But yeah,
that's awesome.
Highly recommend.
Oh, she also has work in Uncanny
great.
and Pseudopod. Very
Awesome.
Cool.
We'll link some
Nice.
to our socials.
I want to read that.
Chelsea, did you read anything this week?
I didn't finish the book that I started reading this week yet, so I will save that for another episode. But I figured I would talk about a book that I read before that I really liked. So, when did I read this? Last summer? Yeah. Okay.
That's
so
how
maybe
long
like
it takes her to read books to everyone.
and this is a novella, so
It's only 3 pages. It's a short story.
Okay.
It's flash.
I also recently finished The Last House on Needless Street, which I loved, but I wanted to talk about this one instead. We can talk about that one another time. So I want to talk about Flowers for the Sea. It's a novella by Zin E. Rocklin, and they actually won a Shirley Jackson Award for this at the last award cycle. So that was fantastic. This is kind of like dark fantasy. And I don't always reach for fantasy. A lot of times when I'm reading it, I enjoy it, but it's not like a go-to for me.
Yeah, same.
But it kind of takes place in this like maybe post-apocalyptic Earth, maybe a second world. There's like kind of clues to both possibilities. But anyway, so it takes place on a ship, and this whole society or this whole like version of humanity exists on the ship. And there has been a huge issue with like continuing the population, like having children. Like a lot of people are dying in childbirth. A lot of children are dying either during gestation or shortly after birth. So the story takes place from the perspective of a pregnant woman on the ship. and she's gotten pretty far along. So the society is very focused on like protecting her, but not necessarily because they like her. They are just protecting her because she's kind of like a vessel for their metaphorical and physical future. And the character herself comes from a past of a lot of trauma, a lot of grief. She's like the sole survivor of a tragedy in her family. I don't remember if she got on the ship by choice or not. So there's that. But so the story follows, I don't know, spoiler alert, if you're planning to read this, I'm going to give away the ending. But the story follows her like through from late in her pregnancy until she gives birth. And in the end, she gives birth to what we perceive to be some sort of monster. And she fights a lot of depression and like suicidal tendencies throughout the story. And then when she gives birth to the baby, I think you kind of expect she doesn't really want much to do with it, but she actually like kind of falls into like a trance with it. And I think she's like then set on like kind of doing this monster's bidding. So she's like, oh, I created this power and I'm going to attach myself to it and protect it. And I don't know, it was really gorgeous. It was like extremely visceral. I do not have experience with motherhood, but this is a story of forced motherhood. So it's very like a lot of pain, a lot of like really heavy emotions. But her prose is like that perfect sweet spot for me in that purple flowery zone where I'm like, it's gorgeous, but it also still makes sense. I'm not like confused. I don't think Zin is trying to trick me or be pretentious. Like she just like, her command over that story was just so impressive and beautiful. So anyway,
That's
and there's a lot of
relevant right now in the social climate. You know, it's a unique take on that.
Yeah, there's a lot of themes of like body autonomy. I think there's some definite like classism stuff going on. Maybe some xenophobia.
When you say it's on a ship, do you mean like a boat or like a spaceship?
Yeah, a boat on sea.
Okay.
Oh, I thought you meant a spaceship too.
Oh, no, it's called Flowers for the Sea.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I mean, it makes sense now when you like sit here and throw that at it.
Yeah. And it's interesting because there's like a few scenes, like I said, she does have these like kind of suicidal tendencies where like, I don't know, she might be considering like throwing herself off the ship. A lot of people do drown in this society. And it's almost like the sea is also protecting her. So it kind of gives this, it made my thought process go of like, she is of the sea's mysticism and the baby is kind of coming from that instead of from the society. So it is this like interesting,
oh, cool.
I don't know, combination of like entities and power. And
does it ever give you like exclusive details about her history, like where this abusive backstory came from? Was it something that's kind of a little bit sort of dubious as to whether or not she is a being of the sea or she's a being of...
Yeah, so there's hints that she looks different.
Right.
And yeah, I don't remember that her history was abusive, but her experience on the ship is abusive.
Right.
But she does, you get her backstory about her family and another character. They were kind of, her family, I believe, was like eradicated and she survived kind of by accident. But so yeah, there's a lot of hints that she's different and that she might possess something that the rest of society doesn't. But
I like that. And I think all three of our choices this week have been very sort of dark fantasy themed.
Yeah, I would say that. Oh, and this was published by Tor.com. So, and I will definitely post a link to order. I had the extreme pleasure of meeting Zin a couple times at a few different cons. So I met them at Necronomicon last summer. And then again, they were at the Merrimack Book Festival in October. And just like such a bright light, super smart, super funny, just very personable. I don't know. The second time I met them, I like ran up and gave her a big hug or gave them a big hug and they remembered me. And that was just like felt special. And like, I don't know, you can tell that they care about the community. And I think that's really, really cool to see.
That's great. I now have 2 more books I have to add to my TBR because both of these sound fantastic.
This was a novella too, so this one's also short.
I do like I like the fact
Ray's
that in this
it's like a shorter novel, but I think it's still considered novel length. It's like 75,000.
Yeah,
Brett,
that
we
sounds
look
right.
at the camera so we don't talk over each other.
Yeah,
I'm
Brett.
sorry.
Elton, what were you saying?
I was just going to say, I really appreciate the fact that sort of particularly in the horror community and the speculative fiction community, they are championing the re-emergence of the novella, because sometimes I look at a book and I'm threatened by a really long word count. I don't always feel like reading something that's going to take me a long time to read. When we've got the options now of novelettes and novellas, I think it's just really, really good because it gives you more of an option for how to spend your time. If you know that you've got a really busy month, but you still want to be reading, you can pick up a novelette or a novella from a lot of these cool indie pubs, and they are just the best things to spend your time with. You don't have to spend a lot of time with them, but you spend a good time with them, and it's great. I love it.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with you. I am really jazzed to have so many like option and format and length options for stories. Oh, one other thing I wanted to talk about this week. I did not participate myself because, as you know, I'm a slow reader. But a group of horror community folks, I don't even know who started it, so apologies. It might have been Nico. I don't know. So someone started the idea to have a trans rights readathon where they would spend a week or more, because some people said they were going to the end of the month, but some people only did 7 full days. So I don't know. I think it's still technically ongoing until the 31st. But the idea was that people would read as much as they could of stories or books written by trans or non-binary writers. And I don't know if this existed in other genres actually, or if it was just horror focused, but I was only tapped into the horror side of it. So
So neat. That's such a neat idea.
yeah,
I think a lot
tried
of
to
the publishers
boost-
were giving away the book for free as well to sort of to champion this activity as well. I know that Ghoulish Books gave away their most recent anthology of trans and non-binary horror, which was edited by Laura Gislesson.
Yeah, I think that one's Bound in Flesh.
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah, so they gave that away. I think that was early too. It was earlier than they planned, and they gave it away for free to support this cause, which is really awesome. And then so most of the people who did the reading also pledged a dollar amount to a specific cause, and then people could support that. So we threw some cutthroat bucks behind a few causes, and we will cross promote those on our social media, and you all can join in too if you are interested. So I don't know. Congrats to everybody who completed it and participated. I don't know. A lot of people read a ton of stuff, and that's not easy. And it was a really awesome fundraiser and awareness raiser. So
At a time when you really sort of need it as well with everything that's going on in the world, I think that's a really, really like cool. A lot of the places that are being supported were reaching out particularly to trans youth. Trying to make life better for people who are currently having a terrible time because of horrible people in the government and
yeah, legislation just keeps going
worse.
lower and lower in terms of removing rights from people. So it's just whatever we can do to help if we are able to.
Oh, sorry. Even without the money attached to it, or the getting eyes on some great marginalized authors, bringing together a sense of community is always so strong, whether you're trans yourself or just an ally, just to be part of a community makes a huge difference to people.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Yeah.
I love events like this too, because there's so many ways to support and participate. Like I said, I wasn't reading, so I was just retweeting everyone that came across my timeline. Like, yeah, someone see this. And then other people made lists of books that people could check out. Obviously there was a financial component, people are reading these works, which is really important to the creators. Hopefully they go on to leave reviews and that they get further seen. So I don't know, really cool project that came about recently.
Yeah. By the time this episode posts, it will be on its last day, but we will still sort of tweet some information about some of the authors that were highlighted throughout the month, and just go out and support them. They are some very, very talented people. We're really, really lucky in the horror community to have some really, really fantastic and talented trans authors.
Yes. So yeah.
Yeah,
Does that wrap up our March?
I think that wraps up March.
Wraps up our
Feels
March.
wrapped up to me.
Yeah.
I'm really excited to get to our guest.
Oh, it's his birthday today as well. So we are very, very lucky to be joined by this particularly smart and talented author.
So talented.
So talented. And we will be back after the break with the one and only TJ Price. See you soon.
All right, and we are back, joined by TJ Price. TJ Price's corporeal being is currently located in Raleigh, North Carolina, with his handsome partner of many years. But his ghosts live in northeastern Connecticut, southern Maine, and North Brooklyn. His work has appeared or is forthcoming in Nightmare Magazine, Pigeonholes, the Bear Creek Gazette, the No Sleep Podcast, and various anthologies. His debut novelette, The Disappearance of Tom Nero, is out on May 16th, 2023 via Spooky House Press. He can be invoked at either tjpricewrites.com or via the Blue Bird at Eerior. Failing that, one can make a circle of chalk on the floor, stand in the center, and burn a photograph of a loved one until all that remains is ashes. Then listen for a murmuring from the walls. You may leave your message after the sound of the screb.
Happy Screb Day and welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. This is very exciting. It's my maiden voyage on a podcast, so please excuse any nervous pauses or the like.
There won't be any nervous pauses. I'll edit them out. Don't worry. You'll sound fantastic.
Oh,
and beyond that, I mean, Chelsea and I can fill up any pause
Yeah,
with the sound of our voices.
I'll just make
Is
up a
there
new rumor
airspace?
about Chelsea.
Very good. Very good. Well,
Too many
thanks for having
rumors
me.
about me.
Pretty excited to finally meet you guys. So cool.
We are very excited for you to be here. Very excited to discuss your book. We all got to read it, luckily. And I think I can speak for all of us when I say that it was incredible.
Yeah.
Oh
absolutely.
yeah, I gobbled that thing down on an airplane and loved it.
I read,
we're talking about the
I read it
Disappearance of
twice
Tom Nero.
back to back straight away. I just started again as
Jealous.
soon as I finished and just went straight back again.
That
That's
is exactly
really
how I
cool.
felt, Elton, when I finished The Disappearance of Tom Nero by TJ Price. I was like, I immediately want to go back to the beginning and like find all the hidden clues. Like it was just such a fun maze.
And then after you do that, you just want to message TJ straight away and be like, so I need to know more because I need more stories about Screb. Give me all the stories about Screb.
Screb. TJ, tell us about Screb.
Screb. Well, I don't know how much I can say about like the book without, I don't know. I've been running into this issue where I'm not quite sure how to talk about it with people because I don't know what elements I should reveal and what elements I should not. So I don't know how to talk about the book without talking about the book. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't want to spoiler it, but at the same time, like,
Well, it
Do you-
is
I can
called,
see that.
It is called my cat Pumpkin has joined us. Her name is Pumpkin Pumpkins.
Love her.
It is called The Disappearance of Tom Nero, so that is the title. And
Yes.
do you have back
you can
copy?
tell us about
for it?
Tom Nero. Who is Tom Nero?
well, we don't have, to answer your Chelsea's question, we don't have any back copy for it there. I don't believe when we actually publish it that there will be anything on the back of the book, which is an interesting choice. And I kind of like, so we kind of leave a lot up to the reader. I'm really, really big on trusting the reader to kind of figure their own way through the maze. And I'm really hoping that the excellent cover art will draw them in to investigate what is inside. We'll see. I think that one of my favorite ways to encounter a book is just by picking it up and kind of leafing through it and seeing what it has to offer. And, you know, if there's anything weird that catches my eye, like that's one of my favorite ways to encounter a book in like a bookstore or something like that. So I'm kind of hoping that this finds its home with like-minded people.
I don't know if
Yeah.
I'm allowed to reveal that I have seen the cover. Am I allowed to talk about that?
You are allowed to reveal that you've seen it, but
I will not describe it.
We're not actually doing a cover reveal until the 11th of April, I believe, on social media.
Close.
So I'm excited
Well,
to share them.
it's fantastic, and I think that it will draw a lot of readers to it.
Yeah.
Can you tell us at least who did it?
Yeah. Their name is Schism. I believe that's what they go by. Her name is Leah. She's a remarkably talented illustrator and visual artist. I've worked with her in the past on a variety of projects. Project I recently dealt with was called Collage Macabre, and it is an anthology of art horror. She did all of the interior illustrations for that anthology, and just was a dream to work with. Gets it, understood exactly what we needed, executed perfectly, open to adaptations and feedback and suggestions. And the minute I stopped working with her for that project and we didn't have an artist yet for Tom Nero, I instantly knew who I wanted to work with. So it was very exciting to get to see her take on it.
So we will link her information. We'll see if there's, commission information, and we'll link that as well below.
Cool.
I like that you mentioned that you're keeping the back text just blank. I had no idea what I was going into when I opened it up. Just none. I didn't know even what it was about, and I was really pleasantly surprised by it. I don't think I've ever read anything like it before. The way that I know that it actually has a name, but I can't remember the word for it. But the formatting, how unique it was, how it changed. Obviously we can't say much without giving a lot of it away. But
would you consider it like
a
work, like ergodic? Would you consider it that way?
I think so. I think ergodic fiction generally refers to the use of footnotes, but it also refers to the intrusion of other media upon the written text, as far as I know. I don't claim to be an entire expert on it, but I do very much enjoy ergodic fiction. I love anything that takes the text and does interesting things with it. A notable example being House of Leaves by Mark C. Danielewski, which has had an obvious impact on this book. And it's probably one of the books that inspired me the most. So
yeah, I feel like that definitely comes through in it, but it's not like replicative. It's not repetitive. Like the way you used your mediums, plural, was like very unique and creative. And I don't know, you could see the influence, but it wasn't like a copycat.
That's how influence works, Chelsea. You're aware.
Such a bitch.
Would it count as like an epistolary novel? I don't know if this fits that definition or not.
Because in part, an epistolary novel usually refers to two different letter writers writing back and forth. But I think it's also sort of grown and expanded to incorporate like emails and journal entries and things of that nature, which obviously the first part of this is from a journal. So I think it's kind of quasi-epistolary. I'm not exactly sure that it fits the definition, but it definitely does mix a lot of different genres and a lot of different ways of reading and looking at text. So that is definitely a part of my process, I would call it.
Oh, that's awesome. So can you walk us through your inspiration for this? Did you go into it knowing how it would evolve and change?
It's tough. I feel like, so on its face, The Disappearance of Tom Nero is about the disappearance of a young man, as the title very explicitly states. But it's more about what goes missing in our life and we don't try to find, and what goes missing in our lives that we do try to find, and what repercussions happen as a result of looking. For a very, very, very long time, I was in a very, very depressed place when I lived in Portland, Maine. And the genesis of this story actually comes from various drunken nights at like bars, writing about a person that could just vanish, that no one would like ever be able to find, or who knew where they went or what they were doing or anything like that. And that kind of came about because of the way that I interact with people socially. Throughout my life, I've hopped from social circle to social circle to social circle. And often there wasn't a lot of closure in between those times. So it's just like I would know a whole bunch of people and then all of a sudden I just wouldn't know them anymore. And I think we all have people like that in our lives, especially like coworkers. You'll work a bunch of different jobs and, suddenly you'll forget the name or the face of the person that you used to work with, that you used to see every day. And you'll just think about them one day like, oh, I wonder whatever happened to such and such a person or whatever. So this book kind of, for me, investigates what it's like to disappear from someone's life. And then it also sort of investigates from the other side what someone does to retain that person from disappearing completely, or what they use that person has left behind to try and find them. Obviously, there's a whole bunch of other stuff that goes on in the book and from different perspectives, but by and large, that's what's, I think, at the core of this particular story.
I mean, it's a very interesting story as well. It's kind of told in a sort of tennis match kind of way, where you've got one side of the story told in more of a sort of a diary format, and another one from the perspective of a writer who's writing it as a short story, which is just a wonderful expression of different styles there. It shows the complete versatility of your writing style, but it doesn't pander to anything. I'm one of those terrible writers where I'll be like, everyone's dumb and I'm going to explain to them via thesis at the end of this story what exactly happened here. Whereas you, with not just this book, but with all of your writing as well, you're very open to the fact that you're willing to let the audience decide what happened here and let them take away from it their own meaning. And I think that's absolutely embodied in this book. It's an incredible feat to be able to achieve something like that. And I'm really impressed with what you've done there. So yeah, big fan.
Thank you. I mean that a lot. That's what I'm striving for. I really like the idea of interacting with the reader in a new way or an unexpected way. And I think there's so much potential in text and its various ancillaries. I think I can kind of reveal, there are some illustrations, there's some interior formatting involved in the book, particularly in the first part, which is a journal section written from the perspective of the eponymous Tom Nero. And those illustrations in the original manuscript were written in brackets, and they were kind of like dummy notes in like a stage play, kind of like, here in the notebook, there is a coffee stain or whatever. And my very capable and talented publisher, Robert Atone from Spooky House Press, upon reading the novelette for submission, said, hey, there's so much we could do with this. We could actually render those illustrations in the text. We could actually do things like what you're suggesting. We could actually make them a part of the text. And I thought, well, hey, that's awesome. Like, who doesn't love like some immersive illustration going on and some cool stuff? And we were very, very lucky to have Alexis Macaluso do those interior formatting and illustrations. So she is kind of responsible for all of the way that it looks, which to me is just, I think it's beautiful. She did a fantastic job.
It's a novelette, so it's going to get released as an ebook, which is, you can incorporate pictures in that. Are you releasing it as a paperback or hardback as well?
Yes, I don't know. I don't think we're doing hardback. I think we're doing paperback for sure. And there's been a little bit of interest in doing it as an audiobook, which it's really funny because the formatting doesn't really lend itself immediately to thinking of it as an audiobook. Again, it's, from a journal perspective, and then it flips to someone who has written a story. So you'd have to get really creative with it, which I would really like to see someone do. I would really like to see someone take the illustrations and sort of manipulate them and use them in like an audio form. I think that could be really, really fun. So we'll see what comes with that.
And like as a reader, I disagree that it on like that out the gate, it wouldn't lend itself to audio. I think your point about the doodles and the illustrations makes sense, but I think that an audiobook narrator could have so much fun with the different voices and the emotions that come up, like an increase in like paranoia and curiosity. And then like, I don't know, at some point tonight, we have to talk about Screb and just like these like little haunting sounds that you created through your prose. I'm like, yes, put that in audio. I want to hear what someone can do with that. Especially with like how creative some podcasts get, and like even some audiobooks I've listened to that I've incorporated like actual like sound mixing and stuff. Like I would love that.
So basically what Robert, we want you to do is rewrite it as a stage play and re-deliver it.
But I actually completely agree with you, Chelsea. I didn't necessarily understand that I agreed with you until you started talking, but imagine that. Like I'm just trying to picture listening to somebody do this, and it would be insane. And I agree with the stage play too. Like, could you picture a one-man show up there or woman?
Oh, that'd be so sick.
And up there.
It's a story about gay people, Brett. Stop trying to erase us. Homophobe.
Well, I can't help it, Elton. You have a very erasable face. So But to circle back, I did, since you touched on the doodles in the margin, did you have like what you wanted doodled in that? So like you said, like I hope it doesn't give away, there was some waves. Did you put like waves in the bracket, or
there were some. I will say that Alexis took a great deal of liberty, and again, I love it, doing a lot of the illustrations. Some of them are taken directly from the text, kind of like what someone might doodle if they were thinking about the thing that they were writing about and had stopped
that came across,
write a cigarette or something like that. But there are very, very specific places in the journal that are meant to denote Tom's kind of declining mental state. And it's kind of like what someone might do if words failed them. And they were left to just sort of doodle and scrawl, and they don't really have anything to kind of describe what's happening to them except for through this other medium. So there are definite areas that were prescriptive in the writing of it, but a great deal of the illustrations that currently exist were dreamed up by Alexis.
So as you're speaking of it, everything you did is so intentional. Like, that's clear when reading it, but also hearing you talk about it and talk about your inspiration, knowing that that's the inspiration. It's just, you nailed it in every facet. Like, that is exactly what I grasped from it. But then also the doodles, it came across so well that is what it was trying to show. Without spoiling anything, there were a couple doodles that I thought of as like Mario Hills. Those ones specifically, like, it felt exactly as you're describing. It's so hard to do a podcast without being able to like really tone in on.
And we're so far ahead of release as well. Things. We're a couple of months out. The release date of this one is May the
16th.
May the 16th. So we're about 6 weeks out when this episode goes live. So we don't want to spoil it for anyone. But is it available at the moment for pre-order, or do you know when the pre-order goes live?
Yes, I do believe there is a pre-order link. I have it somewhere. I'll have to give it to Chelsea.
So I read a lot of your work because we are friends and writing colleagues, I guess you would say.
I would say writing friends. I consider TJ a friend. Not
I consider you all colleagues.
Yeah,
okay,
we can be
fine.
colleagues and friends.
Downgrade me, fine.
So I'm familiar with a lot of like themes that you tend to write, but can you talk a little bit about any underlying theme or message you were trying to get across specifically in Tom Nero?
I don't think there was any message really. There's definitely some themes. I like to work with themes, but I don't really think that I was actually trying to like get anything across with this story really, other than just sort of exploring certain like areas of interest to me when it comes to writing, and the human experience, et cetera. But I don't really think there was any kind of message I was trying to push. I don't really know that when I write, I actually try to say things because I'm not very good at saying things. So I just kind of put words together and hope it works out well. And sometimes I get lucky, and sometimes people enjoy it. But I would say that the area of my writing that I'm the most efficient in would be actually telling a story, which is something I'm working on. But I do love the actual act of writing when it comes to putting words together and stringing sentences together on like a syntactical level. That's interesting to me. So I guess this was kind of an exploration of that as well.
Okay. Can I ask? It's sort of personal.
Yeah.
You said that you were coming up with a story when you were sitting in bars, just imagining and thinking about what it meant to truly disappear. Was that affected by a particular time in your life where you were thinking about sort of what it means to exist to other people? Is it something that's come from a personal place for you? Yes, definitely. I think that existing in proximity to other people is one of the most difficult things that anyone can do. I think that, one of the things that we are in general afraid of, and the easiest thing to be afraid of, is the unknown or things that we don't know. And quite frequently, other people are just a total mystery to me. And that is terrifying. The capacity that other people have to do whatever it is that they are doing at any given moment in time is vast. There's nothing you can do to control it. And so for me, thinking about what I mean to other people is a source of horror, because I don't know what I mean to other people. I mean, I could disappear and it could hurt any number of people.
And that to me is something interesting to explore. The bar is such a transitory place. Like the relationships that you make and form at the bar are often formed with alcohol at the base. And so you're looking at something that's kind of exploded and exponential in quality. Like a lot of the friendships that I made weren't really there when I was sober, but they were there when we were drunk. And sometimes other things kind of came into the picture. But I think that, sitting there drinking, thinking about like the weight of your life on other lives can be kind of like an existential thing. So I think that's where a lot of the genesis of the story came from, is thinking about the weight that your life has on other people's lives and how much you are responsible for it, et cetera, et cetera.
And I think the sort of the location of the bar as well, having that factor there, it is, like you say, it's an unknown, it's a different place every time you go into it, so it added to the mystery of sort of the missed connections of the two characters, kind of. And it was sort of like a way station between knowing what happened to them and knowing where they were and then where they'd gone. It was just really beautifully done, and I cannot commend you enough.
Yeah. And like, not only is it a transitory place, is it the right word? Not only at a way station, as Elton would say, but you also, like, in a bar often have familiar characters. Like your bartenders are there, like your townies are there. Like, I don't know, if someone's there on a business trip, they might be there like multiple nights in a row. So it's like such an interesting place to tinker around with in writing and the different types of relationships you would form. So I really loved it.
I feel like it was a very, very big point in my life to be at a bar, because, like you're saying, a bar becomes a very fixed point in your life around which you sort of orbit with all these other people. And I mean, this has been explored countless times. I mean, we have Cheers, which is a very, very famous sitcom, obviously, where everybody knows your name, which sort of deals with the interconnectedness of everyone's lives as it relates to a central location. And location is definitely a big thing in Tom Nero. I also wrote it when I was living in New York City. So the vibe of the piece is very urban in a way, where the city itself is sort of transitory. So you have all these different shifting layers of experience and perspective. And you have people who go to a bar to get drunk and escape from their lives. And then you have people who actually need to escape from their lives. And then you have all these different layers of shifting experience, the city itself being different every time you step out into it. So I think that has a lot to do with the motives behind Disappearing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm English as well, and I felt like you captured sort of the essence of the city there. It didn't necessarily speak to me about New York, so I have no frame of reference, but I definitely felt like the city had its own vibe in it, and it played such an important character, and it was really, really beautifully captured. So there's a supernatural component to it, suggested but not.
Or is it?
Or is it? Yeah. I mean, it's never really explored.
Screb.
And you know that I love closure and completion. So are there any plans to sort of explore that world a little bit more in the future, to maybe resurrect the spirit of Tom Nero for another short story or another novelette? It's
possible. I went to college for theater at the University of Southern Maine, and I had this professor. I wrote a 2-act play for this professor. He was my mentor. Excuse me. And at the end of it, the single female character ends up walking off the stage, just sort of away from all of the things that are happening. And that's sort of her arc. Like, she has all this importance in the characters' lives. And then at the very end, she just decides that she doesn't want anything to do with it anymore. And she just walks away. And my professor very wisely told me, you need to write something about that woman, because if you don't, she's going to haunt you. And I always thought that was a really interesting thing to say. He was kind of a genius when it came to playwriting. He knew, the dynamics of interpersonal relationships really, really well. And that's always sort of stuck with me. I've written a story about that woman since then that sort of transfigured into something else. So whether or not she's still haunting me, I'm not sure. But I will say that I have had inklings of continuing this theory, this story in other ways. And there are definite instances when the Screb makes its appearance in other stories that I've written. So if you're reading anything else that I've wrote, you might want to keep your eye out. There's some clues.
Anything that you've released this year? Because I know you've had quite a busy release schedule from January this year. You've released something, possibly one piece every month so far, up until after Tom Nero. So
actually, yeah, that's true. I have had quite a bit of publication success lately, which is pretty great.
Go TJ, it's amazing.
Yes.
Stay busy, stay published. That's right.
Stay writing. That's the main thing. You're going to stay writing.
Stay haunted.
Stay publishing. Get your stuff out there. I think that's very important. But stay writing is the big thing that you got to do. I don't know. But yes, to answer your question, I'm not exactly sure that any of the stuff that I've been published recently includes any clues. It might, but I can't remember offhand. I try to sort of insert a link to my other work in other pieces just because I'm a nerd like that, and I think it's fun to
Ryan Murphy, but intelligent.
We just got canceled by the Ryan.
Sorry, Ryan.
Thank you, Elton.
No, I like the idea of like a shared universe, which I think writers and creators have been doing since day one. One of my favorite writers, David Mitchell, who is responsible for probably his most well-known book is Cloud Atlas, which they then made into a movie with Tom Hanks and Halle Berry and all that. I haven't seen the movie, but the book is directly linked to every other one of his books that he's published, and they all exist like in proximity to one another, and they're all fantastic. If anyone gets a chance to read David Mitchell, he's one of my favorite writers. Beautiful prose.
I think the word that your college professor used as well about being haunted is the takeaway from Tom Nero. I feel haunted by this story. As soon as I read it, I was just like, wow, it gave me chills. It was something that I think this is why I'm pushing so hard for you to write more about it, because I'm just like, I don't want it to end. I am haunted by it. And that's the mark of a fantastic story, to leave you with that exiting thought that just won't stop haunting you. And I think you've captured that perfectly in this book. I cannot wait for everyone to read it.
I don't remember, Elton, if you said this on air or when we were getting set up, but that you finished it and reread it immediately. And that was also my impulse, even though I didn't do it because you know how I am about reading. I am slow. So I was like, I gotta get to the next thing. But there are so many like intricate tie-ins and like clues and like tiny revelations throughout, both in the doodles in the format and also in the prose and the links between the different storytelling devices that you use, that I was like, I got to a point like halfway through where I was like, I'm paranoid that I'm missing things. Like I was like, I feel like everything means something that I haven't considered. Like I want to restart it and like look for all the clues, which I think is such a sign of your work being wicked compelling. So I don't know, loved it. I think readers are going to pick it up and
so smart.
So
up. Wicked compelling, man. Did you go to Harvard?
Oh my God, guy. You're going to go to Dunks? Go fuck yourself, Elton.
Oh, no.
Oh, God. Not take the Boston out of the girl.
I think that Chelsea got Screb.
I got Screbbed.
Yeah, it's funny. I think both of you are kind of dead on about that. I know I mentioned earlier, and you asked too, if there was any sort of message that I was trying to get across. And I really guess the only message I was trying to get across was trying to communicate a feeling of how like invasive thoughts feel. And as a person who has a lot of anxiety, just in general situations, I don't really know if there's like a technical term for it, but as a person who overthinks things and reads into things too much and hypercritical, hyper self-aware, that sort of thing, like it's a difficult mindset to inhabit all of the time because your brain is just constantly firing. And if there's meaning in everything, then there could be meaning in anything. And therefore you have to be more on guard against all of those different things. Mm-hmm. And so it wasn't necessarily intentional to include that in the story, but a lot of the story has to do with that sort of, I can't get this thought out of my head. I can't stop thinking about this thing. I can't move my brain away from it. I am, haunted by these invasive thoughts. So
I think it's a really good story as well to kind of capture the essence of what you're about as a writer. Because like, obviously I know you offline as well. And I've read some of your other works and I've spoken to you in between writing stints. And I think this book really encapsulates the kind of process you use during writing, as well as sort of building up this amazing character arc for these two characters. And I think if anyone's going to start off from reading TJ Price, this would be a really good starting place to get the idea of who you are as a writer fundamentally. I think this would be,
I agree with that. I think that it goes back to what I said before. You mentioned that you're very specific on your prose, and I do think that that's kind of an overarching theme with your work in general. It's just, it always feels very purposeful. I don't feel as though there's, some kind of rambling nonsense. Every word that's there feels like it's supposed to be there, and it has a direct impact on what you're trying to push across. I know I rambled a little bit, but that was my long-winded way of saying like that's exactly your work in my experience.
That's very kind of you. I thank you, because I don't do a lot of revision or editing after the fact. Often when I feel like something is finished, it feels finished because I'm going through as I'm writing and changing sentences to sometimes word choice to avoid repetition, but oftentimes the flow feels affected in a certain way if I use like a different word instead of the word that I had initially chosen. And then that kind of sets off a chain reaction in the next paragraph and sometimes continues on through the rest of the story. So the choices of the words that I use are very, very deliberate on purpose, because I'm sort of multitasking. I'm editing and drafting at the same time. Not something I would recommend for a lot of people, to be honest. And probably one of my biggest stumbling blocks as a writer is that I'm overly critical of what I'm doing while I'm doing it. And this will often kill projects that I'm working on at like 1,000 words or something like that. But it is good to know that the things that are finished come off as deliberate and edited.
Okay, so you talk about how you edit as you go along, and you do have a propensity for an editing style. I know you've been sort of working for Haven Speculative magazine for a while now as an associate editor. What's that like for you? How does that sort of impact your work as an author?
I knew that when I first started submitting to publications and magazines, that the best way to figure out what I could submit or what I could get published would be to read the submissions that get sent in to various publications. So when I was offered a chance to read submissions for Haven Spec, I jumped at the chance to say, hey, let's see what's on the other side of the coin, just to kind of get a sense of what people are reading, what they like, just to figure out what the temperature of readers are. I don't know what people like to read. I only know what I like to read. So it's difficult for me to figure that kind of stuff out. But Leon has really, really good taste. The editor-in-chief, Leon Pernichero, really great taste in reading and writing. He's a writer himself. And we aligned on a lot of the same opinions of stuff. He would send me a couple stories to read that he had already read, and I would send him back my responses on those stories, kind of what I thought needed to be improved or what I thought could be done better, what I thought, was great, that kind of thing. And he agreed with me on most of those stories. So we moved forward with like a readership, and I read 6 stories a week, give or take, depending on what his schedule is like, depending on what my schedule is like. I've read up to 10 stories a week from him. Which is great. It's a good amount of stories, and he respects and values my opinion. And a lot of the stories that I've passed up to him, he's agreed with, and many of them have actually been published in Haven Spec, which honestly, it's so thrilling to like push someone through from, raw submission to publication. And it's even better when it's a name that no one's ever heard of. I love nothing more than like discovering a story that's written super well, and like prose is there and the voice behind it is really strong, and I can just say, this is awesome, this should be read by a lot of people. And being that sort of arbiter of taste, if you will, and seeing that get published and being able to say, hey, look at that, like that's really cool and more people should read this, and getting them out there, there's nothing like that at all. So
have you found any of your favorite writers through the slush pile for Haven Spec?
Haven's still a relatively new magazine. There's probably about a year's worth of issues out now, and we're working on a whole bunch of different ways to maybe diversify. I know Leon's been working on his own submissions manager behind the scenes, sorry, kind of like Moksha, but he's kind of developing his own stuff in the back end, which I think is admirable. I don't know anything about that, but he wants to do it, and I think that's really fantastic. But I don't really think that I've found any of my favorite writers that way. I have definitely been surprised by a lot of the quality of stuff that I've read. By and large, I find that the submissions are kind of hasty. It feels like a lot of the stuff that I read is people who are kind of exploring drafts. And I get a lot of what I call the chapter one phenomenon, which is where you'll introduce me to a character and something that happens to that character. And then the something that happens to that character is wrapped up by the end of the story. But there's a lot of loose ends, and like we haven't really gotten to know the character yet. There's a lot of world building. There's a lot of details that could be expanded upon, but the story doesn't feel complete. It doesn't feel like resonant in a way that a short story could. And I get a lot of that phenomenon when I'm reading the submissions. So some of those stories, I kind of feel like these are people who are more familiar with reading novels and long works than they are with short stories. I don't think that there's a lot of people who read a lot of short stories who also submit, but I don't know. I'm still fairly new, so take what I say with a grain.
How would you turn that reader experience as an editor into advice for short story writers?
I talk about this for days. I counsel people to read more short stories all the time, and specifically flash fiction. People should read more flash fiction, more drabbles, more shorter works of fiction, because I really think there's a huge amount of talent and discipline that goes into being able to craft something that's very, very small. Some people think it's very, very easy to sit down and just write, a 100-word story or a drabble or a 1,000-word flash piece. And those people might be right. You might be able to craft something that's, readable in 1,000 words, but to make something resonant and to make something feel like it has layers and depth of meaning in 1,000 words is very, very difficult.
And in 100, it's even harder.
Yeah.
Brett, looking at you there, the drabble queen.
Mr. Drabble guy.
No, it was actually randomly Chelsea when she talked me into starting to write drabbles. It was TJ's drabble that she used as the example.
Yeah, that's right.
The one with the cross out in it.
The one from Nom Nom.
The creative writing assignment. It's
that's so true. I forgot about that connection, Brett. That's really funny. That was really early in our friendship.
Yeah, it was intense. I mean, it was one of the best flash fiction pieces that I've ever read, and so that's what made Chelsea convince me to start trying to write drabbles.
No, I was like Brett, join the drabble group or whatever, and he's like, oh, I don't know, how do you do it? And I was like, well, this is the best one I've ever read, and I took a picture of your drabble and Nom Nom and sent it to him. So full circle. This is so cool.
That actually means more to me than anything, to know that that my work was directly responsible for inspiring you. I think that's the best gift a writer can give anyone, a reader or cololeague, regardless. Just to know that you read it and it made you want to make your own thing. That's great. That's Genesis.
Yeah, and I love drabbling now. So it's
awesome.
It started a whole little addiction.
You are our cutthroat drabble queen.
I'm the pusher.
So speaking of sort of flash fiction drabbles and stuff like that, I know that you're currently working on more short fiction, short pulpy sections of literature and fiction that you can come up with in a very sort of smaller amount of time. What's your current sort of plan for what you're going to do with the work that you're working on at the moment?
Well, I took a workshop recently with a couple of people, and I was supposed to write sort of a new piece every week so that they could critique it and look at it. And my whole goal in taking the workshop was to come up with some new material, because I'd felt a great deal of writer's block for quite some time. And so I was hoping to kind of break the spell by being able to write new stuff. But all the new stuff that I wrote was all just centered around old themes like grief, loss. And I mean, you write about what scares you because you want to investigate those things. You want to face your fear. You want to do things like that. And the things that scare me the most are losing people, death, grief. I don't really have a lot of personal experience with things like that. So again, the unknown, the things that I'm exploring are things that are unknown to me. But I seem to continually come back to these themes of grief and loss. And during this workshop, the 3 or 4 micro pieces that I wrote were all centered around those themes. And in the last workshop, I remember saying something just like in exasperation, saying like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. It's another story about some ghost that's haunting someone because they're grieving and their, loss, whatever. And I'm so sorry that it is such a crutch for me. And one of the other workshop participants said, well, I think it's great. She said, I think you should lean into it. She's like, I would read a whole collection of these like small, like grief-oriented pieces. Like, I think you should do it. And everyone else in the workshop agreed with them. And I thought to myself, oh, well, shit. I guess I should have been thinking the other way. Instead of trying to get away from these themes that I continually revisit, I should maybe lean harder into them and see if maybe I can, do more with it. So that was
it's a universal theme as well, isn't it? Grief is something that someone may not have experienced. Like you say, you don't have a lot of a personal experience with grief at the time, but it's something that will speak to everyone at some point in their life. And to explore the different facets of it and to give it that speculative feature as well is really, really powerful. And I've read some of the pieces that you're coming up with lately, just snippets of them, and you're just handling it so powerfully. I think you definitely lean into it, because there's a lot to be mined there, and you're doing a really good job of doing it. So
I think one of the reasons why I align most closely in terms of genre, I mean, I think of genre as a marketing tool. I don't think of it as something that can really help you define yourself as a writer. I think that it can help, like a prompt, like I don't like to say that I'm a horror writer, because I do like horror, but I use a lot of different genre elements, and I write a lot of fiction that doesn't include speculative elements, and I do a lot of different work with language, and I don't like to pigeonhole myself. I do see the value in calling yourself a horror writer and, attaching yourself to a genre, and I don't think that there's anything wrong with that, but I do think that horror is the element and genre that we can mine to get the most universal reactions, because I think horror is at its core the most empathetic genre. There isn't anyone alive who hasn't felt dread. And I feel like my goal in writing a lot of the time is to communicate a feeling or some sort of emotion with people. And I feel like the easiest way to do that is to scare someone.
Yeah, definitely.
I would say too, like I've definitely probably I've read some things of yours that are not yet published. And that combined with some of the things that are coming out from you later in this year, not only do you explore like loss of another, but you also definitely tap into loss of oneself. And that comes out in Tom Nero as well. But yeah, I don't know. Is that a theme that you're aware of that you explore? Okay. Do you want to talk about that at all?
Yes, absolutely. You got it. Nail on the head. That's another huge fear of mine is, like identity and who you are and what pieces of yourself constitute who you are. Your own perspective on yourself is like a prism of who you are. Other people looking at you is a reflection of who you are. I had a pretty rough growing up experience childhood wise. So a lot of my sort of tics and mannerisms come from a place where I think about defense more than anything. And I think about how I can placate other people. I think about how other people are going to be looking at me so that I can kind of preemptively guard myself against threat. It's a very vestigial thing at this point in my life. It's not like I'm not constantly threatened by anything anymore, but I will never forget feeling like I was feeling threatened all the time. And in order to escape that feeling of threat, I had to sort of prognosticate what was going to happen to me, which meant sort of diagnosing what other people thought of me so that I could kind of remove myself from situations preemptively and get out of danger. So thinking about who I am, especially in regards to other people and the loss of self, is like a huge terror for me. And I think dealing with loss of identity and loss of self, especially when it comes to society and various pressures, things of that nature, is like a vast, untapped underwater lake of horror. Maybe not untapped. A lot of writers are dealing with identity and loss of, existence.
But it's like you say, it does span
potential.
every genre, doesn't it? You can write about loss of self and loss of your own agency in anything from romance to erotica to horror to spec fic. You can write about it in anything, and it is a completely universal theme.
One thing that, it just kind of clicked for me, clearly writing is cathartic, right? But if you think about the limited episodes that we've been able to put out so far, we've been able to touch base on how specifically the writers that we've talked to in every episode use their writing as that catharsis. And like, as readers, you really are reading somebody's soul with their work. It's crazy how much of ourselves we actually put into what we're putting out there for public consumption and for people to critique and judge. So, I mean, I guess be kind when you're leaving reviews, because even if it doesn't work for you, you might be, critiquing something that's very powerful to the person that wrote it.
Yeah. And there's definitely a way to be kind and critical and kind, and you can disagree and still not be an asshole.
Yeah.
I feel like we need a whole episode about kindness just to really explore that theme of how you can handle kindness. And shut up, Chelsea.
Because the three of us are the most highly qualified.
I'm kind, just not to you.
I'm not qualified. I admit openly, this is not a thing that's nope.
Hey, everybody online, if you consider yourself to be a kind person, please email us at cutthroatqueenspodcast@gmail.com.
Tell us how you do it.
We'll need a guest host for that week, and yeah.
Maybe
I'm with you, though. I think reviews should be considered carefully before they're put out into the world. But if I read a book I don't like, I just don't talk about it. Yeah. I don't think there's any need for negativity. The only time I take to Twitter or Goodreads and write something about something is when I've really enjoyed it or when it's really left an impression on me. I don't really see any need to put any more negative energy into the world than already exists. I'd rather just talk about things I like and enjoy.
Yeah.
I have a similar habit.
I changed my tune on review writing once I started writing. And it was just more of a even if I read something I didn't like, I was running my own Bookstagram account, right? So I was like, well, my whole thing is I still want to leave a review. I still want to be honest and open. And I think learning about someone's taste also includes learning what they don't like and that kind of thing. So I did want to talk about books that I didn't really like, but coming from a writer perspective, I think I have become a little bit more open. Yeah, this wasn't my jam, but I can see what they were trying to do. You would like this, or I don't know. So it definitely has informed how I read, which is interesting.
I think there's definitely a difference between being critical and being negative. I mean, I think you can be critical without being negative, and I think that that's often necessary to analyzing and deconstructing a work of art or literature in general. I think you have to look at something and say, okay, well, overall, I really enjoyed myself. There's a couple of things I might have changed or I might have done differently or something like that. Or, here's what I thought might have been more effective in this particular instance. But I don't think that that's an insulting thing to just say oh, DNF.
Yeah. Literally just write the word DNF and then move on. Don't give it a star rating. Just move on.
No, yeah, I'm actually really picky about that for myself. Is if I don't finish a book, I'm not going to give it a star rating. If I were to give something a low star rating, which I honestly very rarely remember to leave a rating at all, unless I really loved the book. That's just because I want to talk about the book because I loved it. But if I were to, it would be, these are the things that I guess didn't jive with me. But everybody's 5-star rated books are somebody else's 1-star.
Absolutely.
So Chelsea and I have books that she adores, and I'm like, what are you talking about? It's so bad. But we and
I was
we
just
have pretty
fighting with
similar
TJ
tastes.
over one recently.
So
it's true.
We also really love certain things, so it's impossible to please everybody. So all you writers out there.
All you artists out there, man, just keep doing your thing. You're going to have haters, you're going to have fans, you're going to do whatever you're going to do. Just keep doing it. Just trying to keep better, I guess.
I also feel like getting a low star review is almost like a rite of passage. And I feel like it means you did something right because you did something big. It's you leaned hard into one thing and that person didn't like that thing. But I think it's kind of proof that you succeeded in something.
Yeah,
I don't know. Maybe that's a weird
in the way that stories can't all be horrific or stories can't all be completely positive. You've got that spectrum in between it as well.
Yeah.
And as writers, it's our duty to take that on the nose and not respond, but just to look at what the the thing was that they were trying to say and take away something from it if we have to. It's not really our place to be policing reviews, but if we find a review that's well written, that has some good constructive feedback in it, then take that away, move it on to your next piece, and let it live with you for a while.
Yeah, one of our most that's what I call horror reviews. One of the most detailed and thought out reviews is a 2-star review. And when it came in, somebody was like, "Oh my God, 2-star." And I was like, actually the review's very helpful. I'm not going back and changing any of the stories that are in the anthology, but I was like, it is insightful. I think people would read this and still pick up the book. I'm like, kudos to them. So yeah, back to the original point. I think you can disagree with something, dislike something, still leave a review that's honest.
But you can also call out inequality and shitty behavior from people who are putting out stuff that is not good for the world. So don't feel like you're limited by that. If you find something that's overtly racist or homophobic or transphobic, you can call that out. Please feel free to. Please, you have my permission. Go.
Elton said do it.
I feel like we
totally lost our thread here.
So
I believe very strongly in the whole idea of the death of the author. Once you've published something, I think about it. It's weird when you consider the duality of a reader and a writer. I do both. I read all the time. I'm always reading, and I'm writing a lot of the time as well. But when I read something and I really, really love it, it kind of becomes mine in a way. I look at that book and I say, "Oh, that book was written by so and so," but I think of that book as mine. And it's because of my experience with it. It's because of how I interacted with it. And it's because of where I was in my life when I encountered it and what it did to my life as a result. I don't think about it as, I guess, when my book is out there, it's my book. It's out there and my name is on it and it's my story. I've created it, but I'm not going to own the experience that every single person has with that book because I have sort of died in a way. The death of the author is, in order for the book to be born, the author must die. Yeah, I really think that's just how it is. I don't know if that's true or not.
Every single person who reads it is raising some bastard child version of that book.
Yeah, exactly.
But in their own experience, in their own words.
Maybe just keeping it in the attic, mutated version of your book is living in the attic. I don't know. I love it.
I do think that's a beautiful perspective, though. And I've felt that way. I've been in a few different book clubs, and once in a while I'll read a book that I love so much and that felt like it hit me personally. And I remove myself from the discussion because I don't want to hear criticism. And maybe that's silly, but I'm no, this meant so much to me and I loved it so much. I just want to be in my little bubble with this book. Yeah, and
that's why I refuse to talk about Alice Hoffman with you and Practical Magic because that book.
Sorry, I didn't like Practical Magic.
My life. And you're like, oh, that was boring.
I also didn't like Practical Magic.
Yes, bitch!
Fuck a lot of you. Okay, Alice Hoffman is a fucking genius.
I have never liked anything she's put out. I have tried.
I've never not liked anything she's put out. I love that woman. She is just a treasure. Absolute treasure.
TJ, listen, Alice Hoffman.
Exactly.
Yay or nay?
I have not read.
Probably because it's not. Probably because it's boring.
Fuck off.
I'll read anything. I don't care. I'll read anything.
All right, your new homework is Practical Magic.
Okay, your new homework is the rules of magic, because then she gets into the aunts when they're younger, and they have an uncle called Vincent who is gay but not really gay, kind of just incidentally gay, and then he disappears because he gets him in the back. It's really good. You should read it or listen to an audiobook. Because
I'm always Chelsea
can't read.
I'm always adding it to my list. I've got a list that's the longest in the world. I'm sure everybody can empathize with the long list of books that need to be read.
Definitely. It's unending. Speaking of, though, do you have any recent reads that you loved that you think have or will influence your writing?
Oh, big question. Existential.
That is a good question. I'm always reading to discover new things. New voices, new concepts, new syntax will always kind of spark something new in me. I've been reading a lot lately. I'm trying to think of the last thing that I read that really, really got to me. So many. I should check my Goodreads.
Okay, wait. Flashback. I got to meet TJ in person almost exactly a year ago. And one of the questions he asked me at this brewery was, what's like the last, or I don't know, you're like, what are your top 3 favorite books? You can't look at Goodreads. And I was like, you bitch. But it's such a challenge. Like we definitely rely on like other things kind of being our memory now. So it was a good question. But now you get to answer it.
Now I get to answer it. Okay. Well, the last couple of books that I read were pretty all over the map. I read a book of short stories by an author that was recommended to me that I enjoyed. They're kind of slow, but the pacing was interesting. It's a collection of stories called Volt by Alan Heathcock. It was recommended to me by Christy Noble, who is one of my favorite living, modern, weird writers. I mean, I don't need to qualify that. She's one of my favorite writers, I think, ever at this point. Her collection, The Best of Our Past, The Worst of Our Future, is just the first of, I believe, a trilogy of collections of short stories. She's going to have another one coming out in September called Promise, which is all weird, like science fiction, Black Mirror-y kind of stories. Her prose is like mesmerizing. She does things with language and concepts that are like, they're so mind-blowing, and she's just amazing. I'm very, very happy to be working relatively closely alongside her and learning from her.
Cool.
So that's a big one. What else? I read The Black Maybe by Attila Veres, who is a Hungarian writer. It was published by Valancourt Press. It came out earlier this year. I think it might be up for some awards. It wouldn't surprise me because it's really, really interesting and weird. Lots of really cool concept work being done there.
Do you have any favorite shorts from, you just named like 3 collections. Do you have any favorites from them? That you can remember off the top of your head? But I know sometimes it's hard because I don't always remember the titles.
Well, from Christy Noble's collection, a couple of my favorites off the top of my head, the second story called In the Country, which is an investigation into vanishing. Are we sensing a theme here?
TJ loves disappearing.
As well as pareidolia, which is the phenomenon of perceiving phases and patterns in chaos when they might not necessarily exist. Another fantastic story from that collection is called Mirror House, which is about a physical artist who does work with like panes of glass and mirrors and works with like, it's a fascinating story. I can't do it justice just by summarizing it. And there's just so many great stories in that collection that I could revisit over and over again. But those are the 2 that I remember the most from Christie's collection.
I read her story. Oh no, Brett has to leave. I read her story in Aseptic and Faintly Sadistic. I hadn't gotten that far in our last episode with Jolie, but it was fantastic. Yeah, she just totally nailed it. She experiments in really cool ways, like her sentence structure and her narrative structure, where I could picture myself like maybe a year ago, if I were critiquing it, I would have been like, oh, this is like, you should fix it. Like in terms of a like prescriptive writing, what do I want to say? Prescriptive writing instructions, like it would kind of defy the rules, but it worked really, really well. And so I love reading stuff like that. I find it really inspiring, because it makes me take risks in my own writing, and usually it pans out to be exciting. So
I think you have to do that as a writer. You just have to constantly be experimenting with all the different ways. I mean, language is like a Swiss Army knife. You can use it in so many different ways. You can't use it to open a bottle.
Cut is the best way.
What'd you say, Ellen?
Using it to cut is the best way.
I thought you were going to say you can't use it to open a bottle of wine, but...
Well, if you have a screw top like Ellen, then you're all set.
Everything in the UK is screw top now.
Really?
Yeah, you can drink on the street now. It's great.
That has nothing to do with needing a screw top.
Oh, well, no one's carrying a wine bottle opener around with them, are they?
TJ's a wine snob, I learned. He judged my Costco Kirkland wine. So, TJ, what do you think about screw tops?
Well, the screw tops don't necessarily betoken any sort of like level of quality. It's just that people don't have access to cork.
I'm not saying they do. I'm asking your opinion.
I mean, I think it's kind of like it's a cultural stereotype that screw top has less quality than the ones that have corks, but that's not always true either. I mean, you can also get like you can cork a bottle of wine by using the cork. Like you can actually infiltrate the wine itself and destroy its quality by using a cork. So a lot of vintners have gone to using screw tops.
Okay, and can you tell us what you're drinking to contribute to your expertise,
Okay, so I'm just
please?
going to totally demolish all credibility of anything about wine. Okay, I
This
see.
was a setup and a murder, so please answer my question.
All right, well, let me pull the knife out of my bag. I'm drinking what I call jocularly an old Trashioned, which is bourbon and Monster Energy drink. Thank you, Chelsea.
Is it actually bourbon?
And that's not
Or
a
are
screw top,
you-
actually. I mean, the bourbon probably is, but
The bourbon,
Monster.
bourbon actually has a cork.
So TJ, what have you had out so far this year? What have you got coming up? Have you got a list of places that we can find your work?
Yes, I have had a bunch of stuff come out this year. In January, I had a small flash piece come out on pigeonholes. It's just a flash piece. It's called Such Small Crimes.
okay, calling that just a flash piece is reductive because that piece is incredible. Like, we tweeted about it on our account when it came out, but I'm going to redo it because everyone should read it. It was so good.
Don't be so reductive, TJ. God, you're here to like build yourself up.
Come
not
here to
tear yourself
brag.
down.
I tried
Brag.
really hard. I tried really hard. It slipped out.
I know.
Something
He's like,
negative.
everyone,
Ah.
my advice to everybody is to read Flash. And then he's like, I don't know, it's just a Flash piece.
I know. Yeah, we should cut that out. I didn't mean to say that. It's
I
terrible.
will not.
No, we like it when we talk shit to people, so we're going to leave it in.
I'll take out all the stuff that I've said that's bad, but the stuff that you say is bad.
All the things I say. Okay. I see how it is. Great. Awesome. Everybody come on Cutthroat Queens podcast. They'll make you look like an idiot.
That should be our tagline.
We'll look great. You'll look shit.
No, we want you to look amazing. That's why I
No.
bragged about you. Okay.
Now we've
pigeonhole.
reached the cutthroat portion of the episode.
Exactly.
And the
Okay.
queen portion.
Oh, let me see. Okay, so Such Small Crimes came out in Pigeonholes, January 2023. And then I had a triad of poems that I group titled, Oh, My Heart Curled Like a Fist Around Ropes of Blood.
Damn.
That was published in Crow and Cross Keys in February. It includes my poems, The Seafarer's Wife, a poem called Dissever, and a poem called Harvest. Also in February, I had a short story called Old Man Vreen, like green, but with a V, published in Erie River Publishing's anthology of folk horror called The Old Ways, Volume 1. It was curated by Holly Cornetto and edited by S.O. Green. That was pretty cool. There's a bunch of awesome stories in that volume as well. And most recently, I had a story of mine adapted for audio for the No Sleep podcast. That story is called Stasis. It was on episode 6 of their 19th season, and that was slightly earlier this month. I think that's all of the recent publications that I've got. Forthcoming, I have a few things in various anthologies. Collage Macabre, as mentioned previously, dropping in April. I'll have a
Yeah,
short
we're going
story
to
on
have
that.
a whole episode about that. But I was lucky enough to read an early version of your story in that. Do you want to talk like for a minute about your experience with Collage Macabre?
Okay, yeah, it's Collage Macabre. Awesome, super fun, community-oriented labor of love. 18 stories from a bunch of really talented people, all circling around the theory of art horror. I sort of served as like an editor within the fellowship of people that worked on the stories, so I'm kind of intimately acquainted with most of them. Did a lot of the like graphics work for the social media and the marketing and all of that, involving other people's stories. And my story is about a very dark black paint that causes some issues in a relationship between two guys that's already kind of troubled and exposes the cracks between them, that kind of thing.
Wow.
Awesome.
Looking forward to
Yeah.
that. I've
Yeah,
got a
I'm
copy
really
of it on my
excited. I
Kindle.
haven't that, Ellen.
As I said, I've got a copy on my Kindle. I'm desperate to lean into it, but I needed to focus on rereading Tom Nero again this month.
Yeah, I'm really excited to dig into Collage Macabre myself.
It's going to be good.
What else do you
then.
have coming out?
That is coming out, I think, on April 18th, Collage Macabre with, I think, did I even say the name of my story? I don't think I did. It's called Lack, which, if you notice, is one letter away from black. So
Oh.
fun little language fun
Clever.
there. you know.
Such a TJ Price move. Love it.
And then in June, I will have a story releasing in the anthology Howls from the Wreckage, entitled Heavy Rain, which deals with aspects of body horror, body autonomy, various horrible things happening to people. I'm not alone in that anthology. That one also has a devastating story from Chelsea.
A minute. Yeah, Brett gets it's too bad Brett already left because he yells at me bi-weekly about my story and that. So good times.
It's a great story. I love it. I remember when you were
Thank you.
drafting it, and it was something you were working on, and that was really fun to be a part of. So
That was a
good.
really cool process in general. Yeah. I'm excited for that anthology for sure.
It'll be fun.
All right. You have a
I
lot
think
of stuff coming out and it's all so good and so you.
Oh, I think there's the poem that I have coming out in Nightmare. I don't know when
Yes.
that's coming. It's just coming out at some point. It's just called Dread.
Tell
You
us your
just told us
socials, TJ.
Yeah, tell us where to find you. It was kind of in your bio, but like we should hear it from you because you
sure.
pronounce it correctly.
Honestly, I never really thought about having to say it out loud. So that's something I learned today. Thanks, Brett. Rest in peace. He's
Yeah,
not.
Brett, go back to your day job, loser.
Oh, poor Brett. Yes, you can find me at tjpricewrites.com and on the Bluebird at Eeyore, EERIEYORE.
I think the thing that was
Eerie.
throwing Brett is that you called it the Bluebird and not Twitter. He didn't know what you were talking about.
I don't like to say its name.
We've never talked about this actually, that our intro and outro song is an Elton Skelter original.
Oh, I knew that. I could tell from listening.
He knows me.
Those dulcet tones.
Mhm.
Those dulcet British tones.
British
hang on.
in an American accent.
British.
British.
Water bottle.
British.
What a bottle.
Water bottle.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us, TJ. This has been a really great conversation. And thank you, every listener out there, for joining us for Cutthroat Queens. This episode has been sponsored by Tide Pods, which will scrub the stains right out of your clothes. And also sponsored by Wine Coolers, which keep Elton Skelter alive over there in the UK. So hope to see you next month.
Waking up in a bath of ice. I'm a victim of an organ heist. You know it is true. You know this time you're never gonna get it. But you already stole my